don't take the fucking picture of me, turn that fucking camera off, you bastard! Turn it off, you fucking bastard!
I just stood outside Savage Shop, one of the cheapest shops you could probably possibly buy toiletries, you name it. There's a strong smell of weed around here.
Weed is tight. Weed is tight. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Weed is awesome.
There's a market right behind me, and I'm queuing up ridiculously for a store that isn't even open, but it's called GDP, Gross Domestic Product. Why is it called Gross Domestic Product? Well, it's the name given by the artist Banksy.
Banksy, an anonymous artist specializing in the defacing of public and private property.
Banksy has decided to call it Gross Domestic Product because Croydon is probably one of the areas that really does not benefit from the constant chasing of GDP figures.
Gross domestic product is the market value of all finished goods and services produced within a country in a year.
GDP has been used for the last 7 or 8 decades in a way that is a measure of our productivity, but it doesn't really measure a lot to do with what's really going on in a country. How do you increase the GDP? You import more people.
My worry here is that the government will fall back on more migration to artificially boost economic growth numbers, which doesn't necessarily translate, as you know, into any meaningful increase in your personal prosperity. You see, what really matters is not so much the overall GDP, that it keeps going up, but that each household's well-being improves. And immigration rates of 250,000 people each and every year are putting downward pressure on your wages, upward pressure on the houses your kids want to buy, and obviously clogging up infrastructure.
One of the reasons Banksy started this exhibition is because there's a card-making company that is trying to use the Banksy design and is making money from the Banksy. So Banksy's, to get around that, decided to set up a website so he can sell his material to sort of, so his work, copyright, brand isn't stolen by the card company. Maybe it's Hallmark, maybe it's someone else. But GDP is what the place is called. Now I'm just going to go see what this place is like. One of the ways countries increase GDP is by increasing the number of people in the country. How do you increase the number of people in the country? You import labour. How do you keep costs down? You import cheap labour. How do you import labour? You open up the borders. The European Union is all about open borders. The European Union is a stepping stone to one world government. You have one world government, you allow open borders, you allow the constant cheap labour.
Okay, have a look here. The findings of a Deloitte Access Economics report has challenged both major parties' reluctance to increase immigration rates, despite calls for the business community to face through sluggish economic growth. Now, forget immigration. We all know that that's the Ponzi scheme to keep everything going, as well as pay for welfare down the track. But Deloitte has said that moving the refugee cap from 18 to 44,000 refugees, this is on top of the 200,000 normal people that we would take each and every year, would grow the economy by $37 billion over the next 50 years.
The money raised for this exhibition, if you buy products online, potentially you're endorsing illegal people smuggling, because the money will be going to one of the NGO ships that was an NGO ship confiscated by the Italian government. It looks like I'm just about making it here.
Register.
Significant things about Banksy is his art is always political. The art behind us illustrating from birth that as soon as you're born you're basically surveilled by the state. The UK is one of the has more CCTV cameras than any other state. Just behind China now. Shenzhen has got more CCTV cameras than London. London, second.
So you got a pretty good score.
Oh wow, I think I'm doing well. Not the best, but yeah.
The official outline boasts it will allow the trustworthy to roam freely under heaven, while making it hard for the discredited to take a single step.
And once you're born and you grow up, you join the rat race. I think that's Banksy trying to illustrate you joining the rat race.
This is graffiti. Milena Ryzik writes about art for the New York Times. What do we know about the artist Banksy?
We really only know what Banksy wants us to know, which is that he's a British artist who's made his name mostly doing street art, public work.
For the better part of the past decade, Banksy has presented his pieces of political and social commentary throughout the world. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are among the growing number of collectors known to pay more than $1 million for a Banksy. Street art with a Wall Street price tag.
You have to admire his art. I mean, the lack of how GDP contributes to the Croydon economy is quite significant when you look around here. Croydon is one of the most poorest areas of London. The streets are laden with pound shops, the streets are laden with charity shops. Many of the shops are derelict. That's why Banksy was able to take over this one. This shop had been empty for a long time. And now suddenly we have people interested in consumption.
That the artist said was never his intent when he appeared in disguise for his 2010 documentary Exit Through the Gift Shop.
These famous auction houses, all of a sudden they were selling street art and everything was going a bit crazy, and suddenly it all became about the money, but it never was about the money.
What this is trying to say is, like, we sometimes feel like we are in a fishbowl with ever decreasing water, and this is exhibited by the fish trying to escape from the fishbowl and basically seek the wild, except the wild is just a picture. And they're basically suggesting that everything is for sale, and everything is for sale in the UK. We have sold out everything. Even Tony the Tiger is for sale.
Your Excellency.
It's a total fraud, this idea that there's anything humanitarian about the globalist effort to import millions of people. So then they tried, you know, the second idea, which was, well, we need them we don't have enough people to do the jobs. Europeans are too old, you know, they didn't make enough babies. Now all their pensions are going to go broke if we don't invite these people in. Another gigantic, massive fraud. Almost every study that has looked at this question has found that these new arrivals are going to be costing the taxpayer money indefinitely into the future, right? There is no point where we can say, well, after 20 years, they're going to become net contributors to the public treasury. As far as we know, as far as the eye can tell, they are going to be net drains on the public treasury. So if you're worried about your pension, if you're worried about who's going to do the jobs that Germans or French people or Americans won't do, you're being played for a fool, right? This is not a genuine solution to any of those issues. You know, automation might help take care of some of that. Having more babies might help take care of some of that. If they would quit brainwashing all the kids that they're bad for global warming and all that and the rest of that junk in school. But we are being played here. So we need to figure out what is the real agenda. It's not humanitarian. It doesn't make any economic sense. So why are they doing this? And I think the answer is very clear. I think Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, has articulated it most forcefully and most eloquently. The real agenda here is to destroy Western Christian civilization and to undermine the nation state. Because what happens is, you know, you go to a lot of the major cities in Europe now, the natives are a minority in their own city. Frankfurt, London, Malmo, right? The native population is now a minority in their own city. So what's going to happen? One day these people, natives, will wake up and say, hey, what does it even mean to be German anymore, right? None of these people speak our language. We don't have the same religion. We don't have the same history. We don't have the same culture, the same values, the same beliefs. Why should we have a country called Germany?
Many of the people pushing this in the EU say, you have to get over it. There's not going to be German as we know it. There's not going to be English as we know it. There's not going to be any of these countries as we know it. The new normal is for this new internationalist, multicultural
And then they claim they like diversity.
Yes.
Can you believe it?
Yes.
They're eliminating genuine diversity, and then they tell us they like diversity.
Well, I'm going to implement you anywhere. I know
In Germany, where they don't have the Brexit excuse, there's also been a quarter of negative growth.
I think what the next bit is trying to exhibit, having stayed in our homes and basically being consumers of everything in these little fish bowls of ours, when you rebel against the system, the police, I think their helmets have been turned into disco helmets, you know, just a little bit of fun. And then we all die, making it all a little bit pointless. I think what this exhibits over here is that we are weighed down by accessories. Handbags are a sort of key accessory for most women, and the handbag, the clutch bag, being turned into a brick because we are weighed back down by these stupidly excessive, expensive possessions that women so crave. And then we have the Life Fest over here, welcoming the illegal migrants into Europe with a welcome mat. Probably a real life jacket found in probably on Lesbos or somewhere, any beach in Europe.
Probably best not to ask why refugee charity workers who once supported bringing in migrants now admit they were totally wrong and are moving to Poland. Probably best not to ask why migrants on boats are threatening to kill the people who rescued them because they refuse to take them to northern European welfare havens.
More migrants might make the headline numbers look good, but it's not much more than a Treasury boffin's sleight of hand, and it's no solution for an economy that can't get the fundamentals right, which helps to explain, doesn't it, why so many people don't think they're any richer, even if, again, today we're told the economy is.
And then we have at the end of the exhibition a lot of life jackets rescued from the beaches of Lesbos, or retrieved from the beaches of Lesbos, I would suggest. Interesting exhibition proving how we're obsessed with chasing GDP and how it really, where does it get us? It's an old, archaic thing, term that's been used by the big economies for the last 8 decades. We need to revise that. There's more important things than chasing GDP, chasing possessions, chasing production.
How do you explain Banksy's art to a person that has never seen street art before?
Well, Banksy operates in the same zone that Andy Warhol probably did. You know, when Warhol first started painting soup cans, a lot of people said, we don't get it. But it ended up making a real lasting commentary on the art world and making a real lasting mark. And obviously his work is still really, really valuable.
So I'm trying to have an interview with one of the shop foremen, I guess but he's the shop security, but he's wearing the old shop worker's jacket, the one that Del Boy used to wear it in the show. Too young for that. But
this stuff, Eric, this place is full of stuff, isn't it? This is an Aladdin's cave. It's the horn of plenty.
In the old days, in the 50s and the 60s, they used to wear brown jackets, and they would sell things out of their shops a little bit like this. I think that's the point. So you haven't met your boss?
No comment.
Maybe he has met the boss. Maybe he is Banksy, although I think he might be too young because he doesn't. How old are you?
Can't say.
How old are you?
Can't say.
I reckon you're about 34? You're 34? Older? Younger? Okay, so you're definitely not Banksy. Banksy was around before your time. But that's how we know. How long are you going to be here? 2 weeks. Are you going to be here 24 hours? Shifts, obviously. Yeah.
We can't really give you any answers, I'm afraid.
Can't give me any answers, but
don't know any answers. Don't have anything.
As can I have you saying you can't give you any answers?
Can't give you any information, or we don't know anything.
Don't know anything.
Unfortunately.
He's not Banksy, he claims.
Huh?
He's not Banksy.
I haven't claimed anything.
And but you're here for 2 weeks. You're gonna be standing outside, rain or shine.
We don't know how long we're here.
I heard it's 2 weeks, but but you don't. There's no contract, fixed contract.
Nothing that we've been told.
Do you think everyone realises what Banksy's trying to say by calling it gross domestic product?
I think they do. By the time they've had a good look around and read the information, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think so? It's not just about selfies and.
Is that the word on the street?
Well, I'm just wondering. You see people's reactions, and you've been seeing them all day.
People are just happy that it's occurred in their local town centre. I think really at the moment.
Do you think it's strange that do you think it's strange there's a shop called Gross Domestic Products in a place that really has never really been impacted by the rise in gross domestic products in this country?
I don't know enough about Croydon to answer that question really.
It's got one of the highest poverty levels in the UK, certainly one of the highest in London.
It's a good example of the irony then, I suppose, really.
Well, exactly, and I think that is that what Banksy was trying to sort of...
No idea. I haven't got a clue. I do not know.
I appreciate...
Just like you, I've never met the fella.
Maybe you have. Maybe he's like... He would have popped by at some stage.
He may have done. Yeah.
Definitely. I appreciate your time. I also appreciate I appreciate you letting me have a film. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. So there you have it. The workers have never met Banksy. The guy that's closest to Banksy's age is the guy I was just talking to. Nice chap. Everyone's a nice, friendly chap around here. Obviously, a little bit of aggro you saw from the beginning. Not everyone likes to be on camera.
And don't take the fucking picture of me. Turn that fucking camera off, you bastard. Turn it off, you fucking bastard.
Calm down, dear. Calm down. Listen to the doctor.
Standing right behind me is the Gross Domestic Products exhibition by Banksy. Gross domestic products, as I've previously highlighted, is not a good measure of the standard of living. We chase gross domestic products, certainly as countries, and certainly the bankers chase it, and certainly the traders chase it. I'm guilty of chasing it myself as an investor in the past and present and the future. I will be chasing GDP because it's a measure of wealth creation. However, it's very easy to measure wealth creation when you're measuring things like industrial production. You're measuring in factories producing machinery, factories producing cars, factories producing you name it. However, GDP is very difficult to measure when you're thinking about things like services. Services, for example, you might be a plane and you will efficiently taking passengers back and forth to the different destinations. The efficiency will be amazing if you don't have any plane crashes. However, that doesn't help GDP because if you have a plane crash, plane goes down, you need to build more airplanes, which is good for GDP, but it's not so good for the standard of living and the people's lives affected by that plane crashing. What's strange in Europe, we get GDP is measured, they measure it in all sorts of things. They even measure prostitution as GDP. How is that quantifiable? I'm not sure, but at least they measure it. They don't measure that in other countries, but they do that in mainland Europe, places like Germany. The measure of recession is 2/4 of GDP that are negative.
But are there cracks in that exterior starting to show?
Yes, I think the cracks you can see almost everywhere. I mean, Merkel was much more cautious now after the summer break, as she has also been aware of where the economy is going. I mean, she for the first time sort of said, hopefully there will not be a stimulus. And she said, just for now, there won't be a stimulus.
And we and the rest of Europe will quickly follow Germany and the US. If there's a global slump, the rest of the world tends to follow. Should we continue chasing GDP? I don't think so. I think this is what Banks is trying to illustrate, that we shouldn't be chasing GDP all the time. But it's actually a very interesting exhibition. However, I think most people are going to be distracted by the fact that they can purchase Banksy, which is not the intention of it. I think it's trying to bring awareness to the fact we shouldn't be chasing GDP. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate your thoughts in the comments. Interesting exhibition right in the center of Croydon. Right in the center of Croydon, where we're surrounded by fishmongers, butchers, gambling shops, cheap gyms, jewelry shops, pawnbrokers, fast food restaurants, people that really don't people living on the border of poverty. There's a lot of poverty in Croydon, and when we hear the GDP figures on a monthly basis down the Bloomberg terminals, they're the ones that aren't impacted by the improvement in GDP. They're the ones impacted by mass migration. They're the ones impacted by increased crime. They're the ones impacted by the fact that surveillance culture all around us is right over there. There's cameras watching us all the time. And Banksy's exhibition illustrated that, with the cameras watching you from the day you're born.
It's the ultimate version of Big Brother's watching. No thanks.
Nearly 15 million people have already been prevented from travel.
As soon as you sign the birth certificate, the state effectively owns you. You are the property of the state, and this is why the state continues the Ponzi scheme of increasing the population with cheap labor, which because it is a Ponzi scheme.
They bring in the migrants to actually boost the GDP, and we're relying on that. We should be looking at, if we want to boost our productivity and the GDP, you do it in productivity with more industries, manufacturing, doing jobs. And this is where Australians are fed up with the refugees they're bringing in, that they are, you've got 60 million displaced people throughout the world. People are claiming refugee status because I'm inferior in my country. They may murder me because I'm a homosexual, or I'm against the political scene in that country. So they are shopping around for a place where they can go live a good life. They're given a welfare payment. They don't have to work. And I think it stinks when Australians out there that we need to clean up our own backyard first before we actually bring in more refugees into this country.
Interesting display of art. Political as always. Is the political message going to hit everyone? Is everyone really going to understand every point of the political message? I hope so. But what can we do about it? And I think that's what he's almost trying to illustrate by the fact that the police helmets are getting turned into disco balls, and the fact that it's almost just an entertainment these days. We rebel against the system, we protest against the system. The Gilets jaunes is rioting every week in Paris and all over France. The mainstream media doesn't cover that, and we just slowly walk towards our gravestone and then rinse and repeat.
Lovely, ma. Pick the best one you like. Ari, what do you like? Jerry, what do you like? Pick the best one you like.